Genesis 16, verses 1 to 9, contains a difficult story. There is a lot of drama in there. As we know, the main characters are Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, but Sarah is clearly the protagonist. Now there is a problem. Some time ago, God had made Abraham and Sarah a promise like no other, considering their advanced age. The blessing of becoming parents to a baby boy. Now, to be exact, 10 years had passed since that promise had been made. But God, in Sarah's mind, had been so silent. So in her impatience, she comes up with a desperate plan that would only bring heartache and pain, and in the large scale of things, it would trigger a centuries-old conflict between two people groups in the Middle East. Little did she know about the consequences back then, when she allowed her husband to sleep with her maidservant. Dear brothers and sisters, as I share this special message to you all around the North England Conference, I believe I speak for many today who face a similar dilemma. How do we proceed when God seems silent? What do we do when He seems so quiet? There are 3 life lessons that I would like to share with you from the heart. First, when God seems silent, do expect it to be difficult. Those 10 years that Sarah had to wait on a child probably seemed like an eternity to her. It was so hard for her to wait on God. She knew He had said she would give birth, but it was driving her mad to wait. It's difficult to wait on God. I don't want to mislead you. Dealing with God can sometimes be painful or frustrating. It's not easy to follow God. Here we are in lockdown, in self-isolation, practicing social distancing, unable to go to church, and the worst part is we don't know for how long exactly. It's not exactly easy. But dear friends, God is sometimes silent when we go through difficulties. And these times are the times when our faith is put to the test. God often uses trials and difficult situations to mature our faith. Sometimes God stands by in silence and does nothing because it does help us to get stronger, to get that thicker skin that we need for even more difficult times. Now in James 1, verse 2, we read, "Count it such a joy when you experience trials, because those trials come so that you may develop patience with God. If you are in the midst of a trial, allow yourself to ask God for help, and He gives freely help to those who ask." Now, God's silence may have been a test to see if Sarah and Abraham were going to be faithful and trust His promises. He does the same for us today, every now and then. Now, how else do we really know that we trust God unless that trust is tested from time to time? I know it's not hard. Expect it to be difficult. Lesson number 2 is this: when God seems silent, please don't go ahead of Him. When we go against God's timing and get ahead of Him as Sarah did, we can almost bet that the results will be disastrous. Friend, Sarah must have probably been an inspiration to Frank Sinatra, because after all, she did it her way. She had a surrogate plan to replace God's plan, and it all fell apart. What Sarah actually did is called backwards planning. That's when we make plans and arrangements before we actually check with God. Don't go your way. Sometimes the best way to determine God's will for our lives is to do nothing but simply wait and allow things to play out. This is often hard to do, but it is the wisest thing to do. Consider these verses in the book of Psalms about waiting. Psalm 27, verse 14. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait. Again, wait for the Lord. Psalm 38:15. I wait for you, O Lord. You will answer, O Lord my God. Psalm 130, verse 5. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in his word I put my hope. And do you know what we should do while we wait on God? Mostly we should pray. Prayer is the key to not getting ahead of God. Prayer helps us to make sure that we're not backwards planning. Anne Benefeld, she writes, only time spent with God can bring us into God's rhythm. I'm sure we all want to be in God's rhythm today. Do pray. Lesson number 3, when God seems silent. And this might sound a bit tough. Don't try to understand him. Now, Sarah's main mistake is that she assumed that she understood God. She even said, the Lord has prevented me from having children. She drew the conclusion. She mistook God's silence as meaning she wasn't going to have a child. And she was wrong. Now, someone once said that God's heavenly plan sometimes makes no earthly sense. Now, in Isaiah 55, verse 8, we read, God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my way, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways. In other words, don't try to understand my ways. They are beyond your comprehension. And we may never truly understand God's plan for us completely. It may be that we don't understand it in this life, but he just asks us to trust. The Apostle Paul was imprisoned. He was tortured, he was hated, he was rejected, but somehow he was able to write in Romans 8:28, in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Paul just trusted that God was working things out for good. Dear brothers and sisters, dear friends, you never know how God is orchestrating his plans and his will in your life. He is behind the scenes making it all work out for good, for you and for me, and we just have to trust he knows what he is doing even when he is silent. These words were found written on a wall in Cologne, Germany, where Jews had been hiding from the Nazis during World War II. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in love, even when I don't feel it. And I believe in God, even when he is silent. Now we do know what happened to Sarah. God worked it out for her good. She eventually gave birth to a son, a wonderful son named Isaac, whom she and her husband Abraham would love. Isaac would be a main character in the Bible and a man of God. You see, Sarah, God did have a plan for you. He was watching all over you all the time. His promises were and are true, if you would have only waited until the right time. Dear friends, let us trust God today, even when he seems silent. God bless you. Amen.